Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us to discuss the draft 2021 Flexible Capacity Needs Assessment. My name is Isabella Nicosia, representing ISO Stakeholder Affairs, and I'll be facilitating the web conference today. I'm also joined on the line by Clyde Lutan, Hong Zhao, and Jessica Tahiri. The presentation for today's call is available on the Flexible Capacity Needs Assessment webpage on the California ISO website. Today's call is being recorded, and the recording is for informational and convenience purposes only. Any related transcriptions should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. We will be taking questions throughout the call today, and you can enter the question queue at any time by pressing #2 on your telephone keypad. I'd just like to remind everyone to please introduce yourself before asking your question. So the purpose of this call is to discuss the assumptions, methodology, and draft results of the monthly flexible capacity requirement and availability assessment hours technical study. Specifically, we'll be discussing calculating requirements for all LRAs within the ISO footprint for the RA compliance year 2021, and then the advisory flexible capacity requirements for 2022 and 2023. Just so the agenda for today's call, we'll go over some background and process review, so expected build out from all LSEs, load, wind, and solar profiles, calculating 3-hour net load upward ramp, adding contingency reserves, and then calculating the monthly flexible capacity requirement. And then we'll go over the methodology used for system local availability assessment hours, and this is the availability assessment hours for 2021, and then the draft availability assessment hours for 2022 and 2023. So with that, I will hand it over to our first presenter, Clyde.
Well, thank you, Isabella, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. So the first thing I wanted to start off with is just an overview. Most of you have heard this before. So on slide 4, we want to ensure that load-serving entities, they can track adequate amount of flexible capacity to meet the 2021 operating year. Year ahead, again, the minimum RA flexible required showing is 90%. Month ahead, LSE needs to secure adequate net qualifying capacity to serve the peak demand for that month. And then what we do is we include contingency reserve requirement for that month, and then include that in flexible capacity requirement. And each load serving entity, they need to submit economic bids to the ISO in real time, consistent with the flex capacity requirement. Now on slide 5, how we start off this, that we use the following data here. So we start off with the CEC IP demand forecast for 2021 through 2023. We do have behind-the-meter solar PV production that the CEC has embedded in their load forecast, hourly AAEE. Then we do submit in December each year to the load serving entities their renewable build-out, including rooftop PV capacity. So the data that we get back, we look at the installed capacity by technology, and we look back 1 year. So we ask load serving entities to tell us what they have existing, like in this case, what was existing in 2019 by month. So we ask for a breakdown. This year was, again, solar thermal. We break off the solar PV to tracking and non-tracking. We have an estimate of behind-the-meter solar PV. We'll go over those in a few minutes. This year, one of the first things we had asked for was we wanted to get a feel as to the hybrid resources that's coming in, the co-located resources, because we need to start thinking how these are going to be included in the flexible capacity study moving forward. One of the things we also asked for is the expected date of the new resources that's coming in. So, for instance, all wind, solar plants that's coming in in 2021, we want to know the expected operational year so we can try to model that correctly as best as we could. And so we also, this year we had asked for latitude, longitude, and we used that quite a bit in the past. Right now, I think this is something we may take out in request next year. Resource, looking at outside the ISO, we asked for a couple of things. One, is that energy coming in going to be firm? If it's non-firm, it comes in as a dynamic schedule, and then we need to include that in the flexible capacity study. So the first slide here, slide 6, that really goes into details, shows you the CEC's load forecast that we used for the 2021 study, and then the advisory is 2022, 2023. So this here is strictly the load forecast that we got from the CEC, and then we showed the 2019 actuals, and I think the amount of variability that goes into this forecast is it's a pretty good forecast to work with. Now, 2019, when you look at the actuals, you'd see May was quite low compared to the forecast. Well, last year was pretty abnormal, and May was pretty cold. I remember May, we had a lot of rain, we had a lot of snow in the middle of May, and I know it was a lot colder than the other Mays that I have experienced out here. And I remember that distinctly. You know, I had guests here for 2 weeks, and we couldn't go outside. It was so cold. So 2019 May was kind of abnormal. So we looked at the CC forecast, and then we broke down the LSE submittal. So when you look at slide 7 is a summary of what we collected from the load 7 entities. And you look at this plot here, it goes around through December 2023. It shows you the wind that's expected in the future years, right? As you can see, the wind within the Cal ISL is expected to be pretty flat, you know, a little over 4,000 megawatts. Solar PV tracking is increasing, and then we have a little slight increase in the solar PV fixed. We still have some that's not really decided if they're going to be PV fixed or tracking, and those are shown in red. And so far, we have not seen an increase in the solar thermal. As a matter of fact, you know, we saw throughout the years a slight reduction in solar thermal in or within the ISO's footprint. And essentially, this is the data that we use to calculate the flexible capacity study. Now, the other piece of information I had mentioned that we asked for this year was the load 7 entities submitted for the state resources. And on slide 8 is what we received. And on slide 8 shows you we have roughly about 3,000 megawatts of wind and solar that's dynamically scheduled. Not dynamically scheduled. That's scheduled to come in into the ISO. And then we also had asked, well, what portion of that will be dynamically scheduled? And slide 9 shows you the flexible capacity. So it's roughly about half of that input is going to be dynamically scheduled into the ISO. And we broke that out by wind and PV. And most of that is PV tracking that's coming in as dynamically scheduled. This is what was included in slide, I think it was slide 7, to calculate the flexible capacity requirement for 2021 and the advisory for 2022, 23. One more slide before we open up for questions. It's going to be slide 10. Slide 10 is the behind-the-meter build-out through, in this case, we showed through 2025 because the load 7 entities, they submitted the data. So we showed it through 2025. And as you can see, by the end of 2020, this year, we're looking at roughly 10,000 megawatts of rooftop PV. Rooftop PV is fairly important when you look at flexible capacity. you have a lot of variability with rooftop PV. It's really difficult to estimate what's coming in or the actual production because you've got so many things like clouds and the weather pattern. So we do the best job that we could with this information that we collect. And again, 10,000 megawatts of actual capacity is a lot. This is a lot because I know I work a lot with other balancing authorities throughout the U.S. and Canada. And 10,000 megawatts, nobody is even close to having this amount of rooftop PV into their system. They look to us as seeing how we calculate flexible capacity, and we have shown the way our methodology of calculating flexible capacity to the North American Electric Reliability Council a while back. They liked the method that we use. Just for information, they had imposed this on all balancing authorities in North America to look at what the LSEs is doing and try to estimate their flexible capacity because more and more entities now see wind, solar, rooftop PV into their resource mix. It's a little different integrating wind into the system. The reason being geographic diversity minimizes variability. So with wind, and ERCOT's a good example, you do not see a lot of variability. Actually, the further you go out, you see a reduction in variability. But when you have a lot of solar on the system, you do not see that impact. There was a good study done by Carnegie Mellon about 3 years ago that was published. And what they concluded, and the ISO participated in this study, by the way, what they concluded is beyond 5 solar plants, you do not see geographic diversity minimizing variability. So you see an increase in variability. This is why flexible capacity is so important for the LISL because we got a lot of solar on the grid. So we got roughly about 12,000 megawatts of grid connected solar. And then as you can see here, another 10,000 megawatts by 2020. It's a lot of variability that we see not only in the 3-hour graphs, but intra-hour. We've got one slide to show that. And with that, I'd like to pause for a couple of minutes and see if there are any questions, and we can address those.
Again, you can enter the question queue by pressing #2. Rita, will you let us know if anybody enters the queue?
Definitely. We do not have any questions at this time.
Okay.
Okay, so moving on to slide 11. Slide 11 is, as I have mentioned, the CEC. They try to estimate the rooftop PV productions. The previous slide we showed the capacity that we collected from the load 7 entities. The CEC, they have similar data, and they try to estimate what that production is going to be. And this slide here shows you the maximum monthly, no, this case here, it's the maximum, yearly rooftop PV production. So, again, we break this out in, by month, and that's what's, no, we don't, but the CEC does. And that's what their load forecast is based on. Now, slide 12, slide 12 is a summary of the data that we collect. I showed you the plots previously, but here, if you want to get a comprehensive view, you can see that what we had existing in 2019, and so in terms of solar PV, was 10,151 megawatts, and then what we expect coming in 2020 and 2021. And then we have the same thing for 2022 and 2023. But the focus here was to show 2021 and do not make the slide too overwhelming, right? So you can see, as I had mentioned, the solar thermal is expected to reduce going into 2021 timeframe. And this, again, is what we collected from the load 7 entities. Wind is slightly going to increase by about 200 megawatts. Then you look at the variable resources that's within the ISO's footprint. You're looking at about 15,680 megawatts existing in 2019, and then we expect that to increase to about 17,260 by 2021. And then we broke up the dynamically scheduled wind and solar. You get 1,000 megawatts we have coming in 2019, and that's it's going to be increasing a little in 2020 2021 timeframe. Again, that's what we used in the study. So the total internal and dynamically scheduled resources that went into the analysis is shown in that third to last row. That's 16,785 in 2019, and then for the 2021 study, it's 18,710 megawatts. So incremental addition, it's about 15,720 between 2019, 2020, and then 2021 from 2020, it's about 350 megawatts. We did show here behind the meter solar PV, 1,200 megawatts is about 100 megawatts a month that comes in, and then the CEC does the best they can do to estimate the actual production of that information, and that's reflected in the loads. So slide 13 shows essentially how we use this data. So the last thing we need to calculate is the net load. To calculate the net load, you need to calculate the expected solar build-out, the expected wind build-out, and then calculate net load, which is your load minus your wind production minus your solar production, or you expect it, that is. So this slide 13 here just shows you the net load profile for 2021 through 2023. The subsequent slides goes into a little detail how we do this. So slide 14 is going back to the CEC data, and they did a really comprehensive job in the load forecast, and everything is spelled out. So the link you see there, anybody can click on that. There's about 5,000 or 6,000 and one that we use as the CED 2019 hourly results, color ISO mid. The column that we use in the analysis is column S. I think either Amber or Jessica put this slide together, and I think it was fairly comprehensive, trying to show you how the CEC broke down the data and essentially came up with column S, which is what we use. So with that, column S is what goes into the flexible capacity analysis. Slide 15. So before we go into slide 15, I'd like to pause then for another minute to see if anyone has any questions.
Are there any questions in the queue?
Not at this time.
Okay, so was there a question? Sorry, Isabel?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so slide 15 is when we calculate net load, and actually, before I jump to net load, well, we take the CEC's forecast. So the CEC has two ways they show this. They have that yearly forecast, but the hourly, a monthly forecast, and then they also have this hourly forecast. So we start off the analysis by looking at the CEC's hourly forecast, and the CEC's hourly forecast, if you look at the top right, I thought we had changed this, but this is looking at what we did in 2018, but this is exact analysis that we do for 2019. But we take the hourly, and then when you look at the actual 1 minute data, when you overlay that on the CEC's forecast, you can see that an identical match, right? So we try to make that match as best as we could. So again, Harlan and Jessica went back and they looked at this data. So what we do is we take the hourly actuals to compare that with the CEC hourly actuals. And on the right top, you can see step one of the things we do, we compare the hourly actuals against the hourly forecast. And then we look at the difference. So you look at the difference each hour, you'd see that purple line. That's the difference each hour between the year we study and the actual year that we, or the last actual year. So in this case, we're looking at 2021, so we use 2019 data. So just think about 2020 being in this plot here is 2021, 2018 is 2019, and I said the exact process. So the purple line here now is the difference each hour. And then the mathematical smoothing technique that Hannah and Jessica use is, and they can go to the details if you guys want to find out how that's actually done, is when you take that purple curve and then you change the scale. In this case, it's hard to see the variability on the top right. But when you change that scale from minus 1,000 to 3,000 megawatts, you can see how variable it is. And then the smoothing technique is that orange curve that they try to align, looking at the hourly variability. And then we take that, and the next slide shows you the formula that we use. You end up with this, Isabel, can you go back to the previous one? Yeah, so we take this orange X value, and this is every minute. The smoothing technique will tell you what it is you need to adjust your hourly curve slide. And it's pretty interesting when you look at this and you see the actual in green in 2018. You compare that with the CC's forecast, and then it's kind of difficult to see, but if you look, you'd see that dotted curve down. That's the smoothing curve for in this case, 2018. So it's better than trying to use the 1 minute actuals from previous year, in that you're trying to use the smoothing technique for a subsequent year. And the intent here is to, try to do the best you could and not have jumps in your forecast. So with that, I'd like to pause for another second to see if there are any questions on how we smooth this and how we actually use the CC and the LSEs data to start off the analysis.
You can enter the question queue by pressing #2 on your telephone keypad. Are there any questions in the queue?
We don't have any questions at this time.
Okay, so on slide 16, slide 16 here is looking at the load forecast. The previous slide, we showed what it is we do. So for 2021, we look at the 2019 actuals, and this is minute-by-minute data. So working with these spreadsheets, it's time-consuming. You need to have a lot of memory, and all the data will be posted, so anybody can go back and look at and see exactly how we calculated the net load and how we calculated the ramp. So we add this X to each minute to come up with that. On the previous slide, the lower right curve. And then for 2022, we do the same thing. Again, Jessica and Hong does is they calculate that X for each year, and this is what we use to calculate the binding year within this year 2021, and then the advisory year 2022, 2023. We also do a 2020 to see how that aligns with the 2021, 2022. So this is what how we generate the subsequent years for loads. Slide 17. Slide 17 shows you how we look or how we generate the solar growth. So it's fairly simple. Now we can do this only because we have so much solar and wind on the system. When we started this analysis way back in 2014, the reason why we have a latitude and longitude is we have no historical data to really build on. So we had to use NERC data set to generate profiles. So by knowing the latitude, we can look for a crest or see the crests that were coming in, how close they were to one of these NERC crests, and that's how we generated the 1 minute profiles. Again, we use that latitude, longitude quite a bit to generate these 1 minute profiles in the past. And as we started getting more and more solar on the system and more wind on the system, we found out that, well, with the capacity that was coming in, it was easier to use this methodology. The differences were not much, and then it's pretty close to what you'd expect to see when you have a lot of wind and a lot of solar on the system. So for 2020, let's focus on 2021, you take that 2019 actual, and then each month you look at the monthly capacity that's expected to come in, and then we know the monthly capacity that existed in 2019. So you can use solar profiles based on looking at the 2019 actuals and the expected capacity that's coming in. So we do this for the subsequent years, 2022, 2023, fairly simple calculation, and to kind of estimate what that solar profile is going to look like. Slide 18, we do the same thing for, I thought we had a slide 18 that showed the wind, but we do the same thing for wind growth. We look at the previous year, and we look at the expected capacity that's coming in, and that's how we generate it. So we also add incremental dynamics that's coming in onto the system. So the incremental is included in the solar profiles, included in the wind. That's how we generate, again, the total flexible capacity. Not flexible capacity, the solar and the wind expected profiles for the subsequent years. So the only other thing that we do here now is look at net load. Net load is an agreed upon terminology that we use in the industry. And it's really your load minus wind minus solar production. I know last year there were folks trying to look at this and see should we include behind the meter in net load analysis. Some folks were trying to take some stuff out, but for right now, net load is it's your load production, your load minus your solar production minus your wind production. In this case, behind the meter is included in your load, and that's done by the CC. So slide 19. Slide 19 shows you we take the 3-hour hours, and then the next step is looking at calculating flexible capacity. And the flexible capacity is a straightforward calculation where you look at the maximum 3-hour round for that month, and then you add either your maximum most severe single contingency or 3.5% of your expected peak load demand. And then we have included an epsilon value way back. I think we did this in 2014, looking at if the forecast was really out of whack with what we had predicted, then we do some adjustments with that epsilon. And so far, we think we're pretty close with the actual experience around. So we never really implemented this epsilon value. For this year, we did not make any adjustments to epsilon. For 22, 23, we did not. So This is the way we do this flexible capacity requirement calculation is taking the 3 hours and then adding that contingency and reserve piece. The reason why you want to do this, and I have explained this, I know when we did this presentation last year, is when you're into a 3-hour ramp or you're into any kind of ramp, if you have a contingency, and contingencies can happen anytime, we have an obligation now to the interconnection to, or not only the interconnection, but to NERC. If we got to meet that ramp, and in addition to meeting that ramp, let's say you're 1 hour into the ramp, and we have a contingency, let's say we lose a major unit within the ISO, we got 15 minutes to get that system back to where it was just prior to that contingency. So in addition to meeting that ramp, you got 15 minutes now to meet the contingency that you lost. So we got to get it back to where it was and try to get, it's hard to get frequency back to where it was, but getting your area control error to where it was is the area control error. So the units knew is the mismatch between when you balance supply and demand, is that mismatch is what we call area control error. So we got to get that to where it was just prior to the event that we experienced. This is why, you want to make sure that you can meet that ramp in addition to recovering from your most severe single contingency. Now, some of you may say, well, why? Well, we have to calculate this. If something happens on a 15-minute basis, we do this using 4-second data. When NERC looks at this data, if we recover in 15 minutes and 4 seconds, that's late. And you could get a fine, and these fines are pretty hefty. In the West, the West makes you carry excess reserves for 3 months in addition to a monetary fine. So you do not want to fail these ramps. These ramps, the contingency. The ramps, we look at it a little differently in that there's another calculation that we must do where by all balancing authorities, and this is just information what I think it's important for the group here to understand why flexible capacity is important, is the ISO has an obligation, like all other balancing authorities in North America, to support the interconnection frequency. And we have to do that on a minute-by-minute basis. So, in other words, if you're looking at an hourly ramp, meeting that ramp at the end of the hour is not good enough. We've got to meet that ramp throughout the hour. So this is why flexible capacity is so important for us, and this is why this analysis is a very important analysis. And getting what it is you need to meet that ramp, again, is very important. So jumping to slide 20. Slide 20 is really a summary of the first 19 slides, what it is we did. So here we tried to combine everything into one plot so you can see the 3-hour flexible capacity needs for 2021, and you can see the 3-hour expected maximum monthly ramps that we'd expect to see. And this fault line in that, during the summer months we see the ramps, they are a bit low because the load's higher. You have a lot more, but during the summer months, it's easier to meet the 3-hour ramp than in non-summer months when your load's low and your renewable production's high. So jumping down to slide 21. Slide 21 shows you now the monthly, and this is looking at everything, the monthly 3-hour ramps. Looking at we compared what we expect from 2020 through 2023. We showed the 2019 actuals, and this here is the 3-hour ramp. And we will come back to this one in a minute. Let's jump to slide 22. Slide 22 shows you when you have the contingency reserve requirements onto the previous slide. This is what we recommend that low seven entities, procure like in 2021 for flexible capacity. Looking at this data here, we had we I know our forecasting group, they want to make sure that the data was correct. And they pointed out a couple of months that we need to take a closer look at. So if you look at, I know you guys are going to go back and look at this data in detail, and you want to know why February was lower than January in terms of 2021. And then you compare December, and you say, well, how come November was higher than December? So we went back and we look at our data in detail. And remember what it is we're doing here. You're looking at a forecast 2 years out. A lot of things change on the system, and it just depends on the day, the maximum day that causes this run. And again, this analysis here is subjective in a way, but you do the best you could with the data that you have. So the 3 slides that is coming up just shows you the day that Isabella, can you go to slide 23, please? So 23 is fine. So 23, and actually I was thinking about slide 24, but slide 23 here shows you the actual load with solar net load, actual data by month, and this is the averages, that what we saw in 2019. So a couple of things here that's pretty interesting is your solar production. So, your maximum solar production, which I think everybody knows, is occurring during the summer months, and then you see like, December and January, your solar production is another time. Again, what has a lot to do with that, and then if you want to understand that a little better or in more detail, I think our group can go into details and they can tell you stuff like, the position of the earth and the sun, stuff that I don't really get into. But looking at the actual data, you'd see, typically December, January is, and the non-solar months is lower than the summer months in terms of solar production. And that's what really drives your 3-hour rounds right now. So 3-hour rounds really occurs during sunset when you lose all of that solar. When you lose the grid-connected solar, you also lose the rooftop PV. This is what we got to estimate how much rooftop PV are we going to lose, because you got to make that ramp up, not only for the grid-connected stuff, but the rooftop PV that you're going to be losing. And again, that's embedded into this analysis. So again, it's anybody's guess, looking 2 hours out, trying to predict what's going to happen by month, 2 years from now. So again, this is a breakdown based on actual data, and you can see how variable that net load can be because it depends on your load minus your wind minus your solar. So slide 24 shows you the peak day in February for 2021 that drove the 3-hour ramp, maximum 3-hour ramp analysis. And you can see on this day, we have quite a bit of solar on the system, right? So we started losing over 9,000 megawatts of solar, in addition to losing 9,000 megawatts of solar on the system. Your load is increasing. So that net load ramp is what's really, what we are concerned about. We being the ISO. We got to make sure that we can meet that ramp, as I said. That 3-hour ramp as solar drops off, and then whatever happens with wind, you can see wind varies quite a bit too. In this case, the wind was increasing during that 3-hour ramp. When the wind's increasing, it helps you reduce that 3-hour ramp a bit. But in some cases, in some days, that wind drops off. Coincides when the solar drops off, and now you get a double whammy where that 3-hour ramp increases. So in this case here, this is what really drove the requirement. So all of this data that's in is going to be posted on the website. So anybody can go back and look at the days that drove the actual or the peak requirement. And again, the couple of things you want to look at is when the solar drops off. And the thing to remember here now is what we started to see in the old days mean, a few years back, the 2-hour route could have been anywhere, but then we started to notice that 2-hour route being mostly on weekends. And on weekends, the challenge that we have is your loads are low. And in addition to the loads being low, the solar production and wind production, they cannot tell the difference between weekdays and weekends. So you see more or less the same kind of production depending on the weather. So when you have low loads during the weekend, you have high renewable production, that ramp is pretty big. And that ramp is really mostly, I should say, almost all the time driven by weekends. And on weekends now, you do not have a lot of traditional or conventional units online. So this is why, flexible capacity, again, is important for us. And we're doing more and more analysis every day to try to figure out what it is we need or how can we get, better flexibility on the system. So jumping on to slide 25. Well, slide 25 shows you what drove the requirement in November. And remember, we had said November was kind of high. When you look at what was happening in November, during that run, we were still losing some wind production. And, the wind is very erratic. And some days you can see the wind doing funny things. Wind either flat, less than 200 megawatts, wind increasing during that run, wind decreasing. So when you look at this data, 19 is a good example because that's actual data. You can see that wind does, things that's very hard to predict what the wind's going to do during your 3-hour run. So again, I think the data that goes into this analysis, it's the best that we could do with the data that we have. I don't think there's anything, unless somebody comes up with a better way to do this analysis. But as I said, the all balancing authority in North America now is looking at flexible capacity, and they mimic the way the ISO is doing this analysis because nobody else can come up with a better way. We got, other approximations, but it's not the analysis or the results is not as good as what you see in the next few slides. So again, this is what happened in what we project happening in November, and so this day was November 2nd. So that drove the flexible capacity needs for November. And then when you look at slide 26, is December 20th, and you can see the solar production was not as high in December, and we had a plot that showed the actual 2019 data. And again, this is why that December data, the actual looked kind of out of whack with the rest of the months. And again, when you look at this, it's not if everything is monotonously increasing, you'd expect to see that you can have bad days in between there. Like, in 2019, we had almost the whole of May was colder than expected. So things can happen. And I'll leave that to the forecasting folks to get into more details. But looking at the data on Monday morning, we see some strange things happening. And when you looking at these routes, the reason why we pick Max is you do not want to get caught on days when you really have these kind of routes. And we started to see some fairly significant routes on the system currently. So with this, I'd like to pause for a second to see if there are any questions out there, and then move on.
We do have a question in the queue. Your line's unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, this is Chris Stedman with Customized Energy Solutions. Can you hear me?
I couldn't quite hear. Who is this, please?
Yeah, this is Chris Stedman with Customized Energy Solutions. Can you hear me?
Yes, Chris.
Hi, Clyde. Back on slide 19, I had a quick question for you about the error term piece. Just wanted to understand a little bit more about, it's currently set at 0. Could you expand on that a little bit? Explain a little bit about, if the CAISO has ever used that term at a non-zero, and then what kind of magnitude, if so, that sort of thing.
So, Chris, so the epsilon, the intent here was when we started this whole analysis, remember it's fairly new. We were not really sure of our methodology, right? So we came up with this way of doing it. We wanted to go back and see, well, how would this estimate align with actual? And if we have seen things like 2,000 megawatts difference, then we realized that, hey, this formula that we generated was not accurate enough. Then we would have to tweak a few things, right? And in doing so, we put that epsilon term to say, well, if the actuals were far off from the estimate or the forecast, then we'd have to figure out how to do this epsilon term. But over the years, we found out that the actuals were pretty close. When I say pretty close, when you're looking at this kind of work, especially with a system like the ISO, even flows on a line, plus or minus 50 megawatts is pretty accurate. When I say pretty accurate, it's pretty close. When I was I worked in planning for a while, I worked in operations for a while. And when you're looking at contingency analysis and you can get your flows to match within, plus or minus, 40, 50 megawatts, that's close because remember you're looking at a big system. There's no way you can have a really accurate model. And I can go into a lot of details on that. So it's the same thing approach here. When you're looking at a huge system and you're looking at all of these big variables, right? Big variables being, you got a grid connect, you got a load, and you got wind, and you got solar, and you got rooftop PV, and you're trying to estimate what's happening based on a formula that we just generated, we just came up with. We decided to put that epsilon term to help us in case, as I said, if your forecast was way off from the actuals. I hope that answered the question. If not, I can take another shot with it.
Yeah, it did. That was helpful. Thanks for the clarification.
Okay. So I think, any more questions on that?
We have no further questions in the queue.
Okay, so slide 26 shows you December 20th, where we think we're going to pick, and again, these days could vary when you have actual wind load solar production. So slide 26 and slide 27. So slide 27, and I want to kind of stress this a little. A lot of folks, you keep hearing mistakenly saying, well, we can curtail a lot of renewables to help deal with that 3-hour round. And this plot shows you the actual 2019 data. In 2019, there were days we curtailed almost 5,000 megawatts of renewables. There were also days when we shipped out quite a bit of renewable to EIM entities just to avoid curtailing a lot of renewables. So EIM is helping tremendously in terms of avoiding curtailment. But on some cases, some days when our load's low and your production is high, you do not have a choice but to curtail. So one of the things, we do is we try to minimize curtailment as much as we could. So we take advantage of the time, how much we can export. We look at how much we can send to EIM entities. But on this day here, it shows you what the curtailments, right? So when we look at the 3-hour rounds on any given day, so what we showed on the previous slide is the 3-hour round or the expected 3-hour rounds without curtailments, because there's no way you can predict when or the days you're going to curtail in the subsequent year. So if you look at in 2019, we went back, we look at the days we curtail, and actually this is looking at every 5 minutes when we curtail. So we aligned this with the real-time dispatch information that we had, and we added that back onto the production, so we curtailed solar, wind, and we recreated what that net load was going to look like when you had curtailments back into that. And you can see the red shows you the difference. You can see the months where you have a substantial change from with the 3-hour route with curtailment and without curtailment. And typically, when you think about what really drives curtailment, is energy prices, right? When the price is low, the prices are low between sunrise and sunset. So if you curtail, let's say, until before sunset, and then you allow the renewables to come back on, does not help you in that 3-hour up. So, and again, the prices are fairly high during the 3-hour up. So when you look at the energy prices, it's like a U where you'd see before sunrise, the energy prices is kind of high. And then during the middle of the day, especially on weekends, the prices can go negative. And I have seen it negative for on days, most of the hours between sunrise and sunset. And again, it just depends on your production, your load, and then it starts increasing during that 3-hour up. So something I think we want to think about, when you talk to or you hear some folks, look at this and say, well, we can just curtail a lot of renewables. Well, we showed this plot here to emphasize that curtailing renewables is one thing, but curtailing it based on prices ain't really going to help you much. And then we still need to figure out what it is we're going to do during that 3-hour round to minimize this 3-hour round. So, again, the whole intent of the ISO has 8 initiatives on the website, what it is we're trying to do to raise the belly of the duck. And again, I really want to emphasize we do the best we could in the operating arena to minimize curtailments of renewables. We do this when we see, we anticipate problems when system frequency, if we anticipate that going high, if our area controller, we expect that to be high, then you do not have a choice but to curtail in real time. And again, as I said, what I do is I look at the system every minute, how well we control the grid and meet the control performance standards we have to meet that's established by NERC and FERC, and I can go back and tell the hours that we performed badly and the hours that we did well. So a lot of this here is driven by grid performance and what it is we need on the system. So slide 28 shows you a comparison. So when you look at 2017, so right now we're doing the study for 2021. But when you go back and say, well, so how did you guys perform in 2017 when you predicted what it is we would need in 2018 in terms of 3-hour rounds? So you can see here, so when we predicted in 2017 what we needed in 2018, so we went back and plotted this curve here, not this curve, this bar chart to show you. So 2017 is the actuals. And you can see the actuals for 2018, which is the orange plot. And then you can show when we went back and added the actual curtailment in 2018, how did that 3-hour route look? And I think the takeaway from this is typically what we do is not what we do, it's just happens like this, is you have so much unknown there. When you look at the actuals compared with what the forecast is, our actuals is pretty on the low side. And not by a lot, but it is low. And then again, you look at March, the amount of curtailments that happened. But again, these are huge runs, 16,000 megawatts. Last year we saw runs that were pretty close to 16,000 megawatts. The actual, I think it was 15.6 or 15.7. I do not remember often, but these runs are getting up there. And again, to put that in context, when you think of a ramp of 16,000 megawatts, and the ramps are not evenly distributed. So in 1 hour, you can see the requirement for 50% of that ramp. So I have seen days where 7,600 megawatts, so 3,000, sorry, not 3,000, but 7,500 megawatts, or more than 50% of that for our ramp. We needed that in 1 hour. And just, I know it's hard to kind of get a grasp on that, but most of you here are familiar with SMUD. If you think about the SMUD peak load, we're talking about moving 3 times SMUD peak in an hour. So again, when you think about flexible capacity, this is not something that we take lightly. It's a lot of energy. You got to move. You got to have fast resources to do this. And when you look at the Cal ISO fleet, you know, I did this analysis yesterday, just looking to see how fast, what kind of resources we have that can move pretty quick. You know, well, we kind of knew this, but most of the larger units, their ramp rate is pretty low, so like 5 megawatts a minute. We got about 3, or I would say 4 hybrid units now that can move fast. And when I say fast, they can move 40 megawatts a minute. But when you're looking at ramps, and the total capacity is about 1,200 megawatts. But when you're looking at ramps at 7,000 in 1 hour, 15,000 in 3 hours, these ramps are huge to me. So you got to commit a lot of resources in aggregate to give you the flexibility that you need, and especially on weekends. This is what makes it so difficult for us, because you cannot really commit a lot of resources in aggregate to give you that 3-hour ramp. So again, this is one slide. You know, after this presentation, if anyone has questions on it, we could go into a lot of details. And on slide 29 is a similar comparison when you look at, well, in 2018, when we did this analysis for 2019, how did you guys compare? And again, you see the same pattern. The actuals, you know, that we saw in 2018. So when you look at what we predicted in 2018 for 2019 is red. And then what did we actually experience? And you can see, again, the same pattern. What we forecasted was typically less than what we actually experienced. And I know a lot of folks out there saying, well, you guys have a forecast. Well, this is the actual data that I think we need as a group to look at and see, again, and then acknowledge that you have a lot of unknowns out there. You know, the load's not as predictable as we thought it was going to be predicted as it was a few years ago, right? Wind and solar is pretty hard to predict. You can have, and I tell folks this, you can have a good wind forecaster, you can have a good load forecaster, you can have a good solar forecaster, and you can have a good guesstimate as to what you think rooftop PV is going to be doing on any given day. But then when you project that out, even for your next day operation, then you're not online. So your errors cannot be additive, and your errors can, you know, sometimes subtract. But what we're trying to do here, looking 2 hours out, I think is not an easy task. And looking at the forecast against the actuals plus curtailment, I think they fall in line when you're looking at huge numbers like 14,000, 16,000 megawatts. So again, we showed slide 28, 29, just to give, you know, the callers a feel as to how close are these predictions to your actuals. And again, as I said, when you're looking at a huge system, flows on one line, especially like the 500,000 volt system, if you can get that within plus or minus, you know, I would say 50 megawatts, you're pretty close, right? So remember, again, it's a huge system. You got a lot of unknowns there. So this is what it is. So I'll pause here for a second, see if anyone has any questions, and then I'll close up.
A reminder, you can enter the question queue by pressing #2.
We do not have any. We do not have any questions at this time.
Okay, so Isabel, could you move on to 30? So 30 here shows you what we actually experience, and this here shows you the maximum throw round we saw last year. It was 15.6, and I want to say, I think it was higher than that, but I need to go back and look at 19 in detail, but that was pretty close, 15.6, 39. That happened on January 1st, and then net load. Net load is 56. We saw in April last year, and that's pretty low. And we, when I say we, operating folks at the ISO, we get pretty nervous when we see that net load dropping low. And the net load dropping low impacts the ability to meet that well. This is why, as I said, we focus a lot on how do we meet this well, what kind of resources we need in terms of speed to help you with that. One last thing I want to interject in this one is when you think about the Cal ISO, the resource mix is pretty diverse. By that I mean we got resources such as geothermal and biomass and biogas and run-of-the-river hydro, and we still got 2 nukes that's sitting out there. When you stack those out, you can be anywhere from 7,000 to 9,000 megawatts on a given day, depending on production. And that production is base loaded. And by base loaded, I mean you do not have any kind of flexibility on things like geothermal. I think we got one. I know the CEC had a project where they were looking at getting some flexibility from geothermal, but it takes a long time. You cannot just call this plant and say, hey, increase or decrease production. You got to give this thing a lot of forewarning so that the steam flow is not impacted. So it takes a while. So please do not mix flexibility like demand response when we say, hey, back up and you have 10 minutes to do it or 20 minutes to do it. Or hours to do it. In this case, when we're looking at flexibility, we want to dispatch you in 5 minutes. So do you have the capability to do it? So again, when we look at this DAC, the belly of the DAC, what I think we need to focus on is when you're looking at 7,000 megawatts of actual production that's base loaded, and you're encroaching on days like 5,600 megawatts, you're encroaching on that non-dispatchable gen. So the question that anybody should keep in mind now is, well, how do I meet that around internally? So that's another topic that we are discussing internally at the ISO, but this is something I want folks to think about. When our net load drops low, in our case, personally, me, I do not like to see it drop, this low, because it impacts that run. And then, as I said, I look at the system every minute. When I look at performance during runs with this low net loads, you see some funny things happening. So slide 31. Slide 31, what we did this year is we tried to show the peak. So the peak is that red diamond. So the peak for the day, and then we showed the blue is the 3-hour route. So you can see 3-hour route, like in March, was 53% of your peak. So now, when you think about it, you got to make that peak load, but more than half of that peak load, you need to make that in 3 hours. So these are kind of scary numbers when we look at what it is you need. So you can just look at this and look at the non-sum amounts and tell, well, that fleet, something needs to be done. And so this is, things that we're looking at. Meeting that ramp, as I said, when you're looking at, let's on an hourly basis, if we know the load's going to change from this hour to the next hour and the increase is going to be 5,000 megawatts, and if we get that 5,000 megawatts at the end of that hour or the last 30 minutes, the control performance for the asset is going to look pretty bad. So you got to control the system on a minute-by-minute basis. If not, we cause this problem, or we could cause problems throughout the West. The neighboring DA is going to see, things like high frequency. They're going to see problems controlling the things that's not really their problem. So when we have problems, when we have oversupply, we got to contain that within the ISO. And one story I wanted to build on here is we had the German system operators at the ISO about a year and a half ago. And I asked one of these guys, how do they deal with the oversupply? And this was one of the senior operators, and he told me, well, we just allow the energy to flow to neighboring balancing parties. And I go, well, we cannot do that in the U.S. You got to contain that within. If we have a problem, we got to contain that within the ISO. And he says, oh, that's what we do. And ironically, about 3 months after that, I was reading an article where Czechoslovakia said, look, we're going to open the ties up because we cannot accommodate the oversupply. You're causing losses in our system, high frequency, and if you cannot contain oversupply, then we're going to open the ties up. So I thought that was pretty interesting because, as an operator, in some places you can do whatever it is you want to do. But in the U.S., operating guidelines are very, very strict. And you got to contain all the problems that you got within, or as best as you can within your BA. Else you're going to get a lot of complaints from neighboring BA. So slide 32. Shows you the wind solar curtailments for 2018, 2019. When you look at this, you see like in April, May, we did quite a bit of curtailment. Last year in April and May because we had a good hydro year. And again, in May, there were days, not days, but there was one day we curtailed over 5,000 megawatts, and that's a lot of energy. And again, in terms of curtailment, that's twice smart peak load you're looking at in terms of curtailment. And again, we saw more and more curtailment throughout the month in 19 that we saw in 2018. It'll be interesting to see how it looks in 2020. But this, looking by month is what we saw. And then the other thing we did is look at slide 33. We took the same curtailment data. And Isabella, can you move on to 33, please? Yeah, so you look at this curtailment by hour, and you can see most of the curtailment is between sunrise and sunset. This is when you tend to see, problems not only 3 hour round, but intra-hour round now is something that, is creeping up on us, and it's something we need to get a handle of. So I remember on the peak day last year, we did curtail during the 3 hour round, and that helped us to make the 3 hour round. But again, curtailing, most people would curtail based on energy prices. So with this, Isabel, can you move on one more? Okay, so back to 34, I think it was, 33. So I'd like to, before I pass it on to Hong, I'd like to see if there are any questions in the last few slides that we talked about.
Are there any questions in the queue for Clyde?
We have no questions at this time.
Okay, and with that, I'm going to pass this on to Han, and Han can tell you what he does now when I pass on to him the flexible capacity needs and the 3 hour run, how he breaks that out. So Han?
Yeah, thank you, Clyde, for your heavy analysis, and you've done all the heavy work. So mine is really look at the slide 35, and go to 35. So basically, after all these analysis, data management, manipulation, and cleaning all those, so we end up with this slide. This is the most important slide, and slide 35, and is the monthly, each month, what is the ISO flex capacity need. So my presentation is basically to tell, slice this cake. If you look at this cake, and how what the characteristics of this cake we may see. First of all, you can see this generally, this pattern has been keeping over years, which is the summer months is generally the capacity need is lower than the winter months. So basically we have a dip starting from the May up to September, and that dip still, the pattern is still there. However, if you compare to last year's, this dip is not as deep as the last year or year before. So there are some behind me, there's something going on, but that's my observation. So can you go to next slide, slide 36? So this is the how the that red bars are decomposed by the components. Since that's the net load flexibility, they are decomposed by the water contributions from the load, wind, and the solar. So for this, you can still, the wind is contribution is pretty much random, and just a little bit since the wind is just blowing east, blowing west, and all kinds of, so it's not much contribution. However, the pattern we have seen over years is still there. Is the load in the summer months, you can see the July, August, and the September, all those contributions tend to be small compared to all the rest of the month. And the solar contribution is 70, above 70, around 70. And this we have observed before. However, the compared to last year, the load contribution increased slightly for July. The lowest July is 17% last year, and this year is 21%. I believe it's some data fluctuation or something. So I stop. Any questions?
We do not have any questions.
Okay, so move on. Move on to 37. So this is how we are going to use that red bar, how further slice how further slice that red bar to different categories. One is the base flexibility. Base flexibility has been defined over years. Is the largest 3 hour seconds. Pay attention to the second. And the net load ramp, how the secondary is defined as the largest 3 hour outside the range of the primary, the largest for the day. This largest here is for each month. You have the largest secondary. So secondary for each day is defined as the largest 3 hour ramp outside the range of the primary for that day, primary ramp for that day. So this has been defined since 2014, I believe. Then the peak flexibility, the second one is the 90%, 95% minus this the base category. So it's kind of a middle chunk. The super peak is the top 5% as always. So this is no change. And go to 38, please. Thank you. So this is the to look at the distribution of the primary net load ramp for each month, and secondary net load ramp, the distribution in each month. So, but look at this. This pattern is pretty much similar to last year. However, there was some little subtle difference. The difference is the separation between the secondary and the primary is a little bit bigger. And Also you can notice, starting on the right graph, on the right side graph, the graph on the right side, you can see there is a little dip in the May and June and to the August. There is a little dip there. Since this the requirement is based on the maximum for the 3-hour net load ramp in that month, there are some fluctuations of the data fluctuations. So we kind of want to minimize this fluctuation. So we defined a season to be from the May into September to cover that dip, cover that dip, to get we define the season. This season, pretty much, we have been using this month since the dip keep the same pattern. We cannot really guarantee next year we'll have the same pattern. So our season, summer season, may including October, for instance, we'll see. But currently, we still keep the previous year's definition of the summer and the winter. We get the average of these 3 months and to define the base category, second category. And so then you go this next slide, please. So you can see if we allow the fluctuation, then you can see there are some variations. If you look at the May on the right side, the numbers are 40, 45, 53, 56, 53. So to reduce this fluctuation, statistically we define the season as this month, then we get 49 for the base category for all these months. The rest is 38. The contribution of the peak will be the 46 for the whole season. So this is the simply to reduce the fluctuations within neighboring months. So I stop for ask questions.
Are there any questions in the queue?
We do not have any.
Then you go ahead. Thank you. For next slide. So this is off. We have the red bar. Remember the red bar at the very beginning on the 35. So we doing this definition of the base category and peak category and the super peak. Super peak is the red and the top 5%. So after using this seasonal adjustment, you can see the contribution accordingly in the although the blue bar is kind of jumping and down, but the ratio of the blue bar over the total height of the bar is about 49%. So for all these summer months, so the up and downs for the blue bar is because of the total bar, the height of total bar are varying. So this is the general contribution. Then we go to next. Next is the CPUCs overall, the jurisdiction, how much we are going to allocate to the CPUC jurisdiction LSE AOIs. So the pattern, of course, is roughly the same as the previous slide. And the magnitude is generally around 95% of the CPUC over the overall ISO capacity need. I want to just add the allocation of the wind and the solar will be the same since the methodology for allocating the wind and the solar has been keeping the same since 2014. The load allocation contributions will be using the formula we have been adopted since last year. So we have no change for the allocation and on the formulas for contribution for load profile and the wind profile, solar profile will be the same as the last year. Go to next. So this is still the third way to looking at that the red bar on the slide 35. So we have been looking at the categories. We have been looking at the load and wind contributions. So now this is the third way of this to see how the 3-hour ramp, when it starting time of how that started. So then we use that information to get the most of obligation hours, which is pretty much the same as the starting hour plus 5 hours from the starting hour. So basically you have a 3-hour ramp since your ramp started. So look at the January. If the ramp started at the hour ending 15, then you count it, say, hour 15, 16, 17. So that's the 3-hour ramp. Then that's the 6th of the net load ramp. After that, you still keep ramping up. The net load still keep ramping up. So we added 2 more hours for the most awful hours. So for January, will be 15, 16, 17, and 2 hours 18 to 19. So the methodology here is just a simple math. It's just a roughly count. When it's the most concentrated starting time, then you add 5 more hours of that. So March provide a little split between the servers. You have 14 and 16. So then when we look at the actual daily graph of load ramp, we in this year we decided to put the March the same as the April, May in that range, and September and October has the shifting back 1 more hour. So basically in the March, April, May, June, July will be starting 17 to 21. Then the September and August will be 16 to 20. And the November, December, January, February will be 15 to 19. So all these nicely summarized in the next slide. You can go to the next slide, please. So you can see that's what I said. It is the January, February, November, December will be hour 15 to hour 19, and October, September, October will be 16 to 20, and the rest of the month 17 to 21. So you can see this shoulder month and gradually transitioned to the summer months and then back to the winter months. So this is the we recommend, based on the study of this year, we recommended this month, the most offer for each month. So next year, whether you keep the same pattern or not, it depends on how the CEC load forecast, how the solar, how the behind the meter behaves. So may shifting hour back in the forth a little bit, but generally do not change that much. So it's basically the selection between 15 to 21. So that's the ISO's most offer we have been recommended over years like this. So next slide. And this is just a work summary of what I have been talking about so far. So I'd like to stop here for general question of how we really look at the red bars in the slide 35 different ways, in the base category, and the load wind solar contribution, and the starting time. So we have 3 different ways to look at the red bars, and we then we make the recommendation and the allocation accordingly. So I'm waiting for the questions before I hand it to Jessica. So any questions?
We do not have any questions at this time.
Thank you. So Jessica, it's all yours now.
All right, thanks, Hong. I will wrap things up by going over the availability assessment hours. Next slide, please. So the background of the availability assessment hours is their concept originally developed as part of the ISO standard capacity product, and they're maintained as part of the Reliability Service Initiative, or RAIN. So what we do is our goal here is to determine the hours of greatest need to maximize the effectiveness of the availability incentive structure, and these hours are determined annually by the ISO, and they are published in the BPM, and then resources are rewarded for having availability during hours of the greatest need. Next slide, please. So to come up with these hours, we use the CEC IPER data that we described in the slides above, I believe column S, to obtain the hourly average load. And note here that now we are switching to using load instead of net load, which we were talking about in the previous slide. So for the availability assessment hours, we're just looking at the load. So we use the hourly average load by month by hour, and then we look at that for years 2019 to 2023. And we use that data to calculate the top 5% of load hours within each month using the hourly load distribution for years 2021 to 2023. So taking a look at the summer months, so April through July, 2019 observations on these plots are the orange lines, and then we have some subsequent months for the years 2021 and 2023 on here. And then the availability assessment hours on the plots are highlighted by the yellow 5-hour blocks that you see here. So worth noting on this slide, we see that the CEC load forecast for the years 2021 and 2023 does shift later for most of the months here compared to the 2019 observations. Also, you'll notice that April and May from 2019 are much lower compared to the forecast for 2020, 2021, and 2023. And I'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide. But that's basically because we had a very cool and wet April and May of 2019, which impacted the load shape there for April and May. Main takeaway from these is that we see that the CEC forecast is shifting peak a little bit later. So we're keeping an eye on this. But we have kept the available assessment hours the same, 17 through 21, just because we want to keep the hours mainly for after the sun starts to go down and we lose that solar generation we have. Next slide, please. So just quickly going over some of the observed temperature and precipitation that we saw for May last year, which contributed to that very low peak that we saw through the month of May. You can see that most of the state had record cold temperatures below normal, particularly through Southern California, and then precipitation in some spots had their record wettest May, and some places saw over 600% of their typical May precipitation in 2019. So that contributed to why we saw the very low load peak numbers and shapes for 2019 versus the forecast for 2021 and 2023. Next slide, please. So continuing on with the summer months, August, September, and October 2019 compared to 2021 and 23. Here again, we're seeing that the peak is shifting slightly later for those summer months, but generally the shape does stay the same. October 19, you can also see a lower peak for 2019 compared to the forecast. And again, we did have unusually cold temperatures for a large portion of the state for October 2019, which likely contributed to being lower in the actuals compared to the forecast. But just like the other months in the summer season, you do see that peak load shift a little bit later into the evening hours. Next slide, please. So here's just a summary of the 2021 only, the top 5% of load hours. So the y-axis here is the frequency at which we saw the top 5% of load hours, and then they're color-coded by hour here across all of the months. So you can see that primarily by putting the AH hours of 17 to 21, we capture a large portion of those highest frequency of the top 5% of load hours across all of the months. And I will pause there for questions before I move on to winter.
And you can enter the question queue by pressing #2. Are there any questions in the queue?
We do not have any questions at this time.
Great. All right, next slide, please. I'll go on to winter. So for winter, so looking at November and December for 2019 and compared to 2021 to 23, here we don't see as much of the change in shape, but you do notice that the peak does shift to higher values. But generally the shape stays the same for 2021 and 2023 compared to the observations for 2019. Another thing that you'll notice is the flat shape in the middle of the day, and that's likely due to cloud cover across the state, leading to the higher load profile through the middle of the day. Next slide, please. And so finishing up with the remainder of our winter months, January through March, you see very similar conditions to the previous months that I showed, with the general shape of the peak and the hours staying the same, but just the peak values shift higher. And you can see here again, we have the AAH hours set as hour ending 17 through 21, which is the same as previous years. The next slide, please. And finally, showing that same distribution as we showed for the summer months. You can see here that the distribution for the winter months isn't as wide as it is for the summer. So we can see that the top 5% of load hours for most of the months are generally hours 19 or 20 for the winter months. So the AAH of 17 through 21 captures across all of the months the highest frequency of the top 5% of load hours. Next slide, please. So here's our availability assessment hours draft recommendation. Last year we published hours of 17 through 21 for 2020, and then this year for 2021, and as well as 2022 and 23, we're publishing the same hour ending 17 through 21 for both the winter and the summer seasons. Next slide, please. And just to kind of wrap things up here, as a summary, so the 2021 system and local RA AAH hours, we looked at the top 5% of load hours using the average hourly load, and for the summer months, April through October, we went for hours of hour ending 17 to 21, or 4 p.m. to 9 p.m., and the same for the winter months, November through March, 4 p.m. through 9 p.m., or hour ending 17 through hour 21. And then this bottom chart here shows for flexible RA, the AAH and must offer obligation hours that Hong discussed for each category, and the types of days, what those hours are. And you can see the hours he discussed here for the different categories and what those hours are for each of the months for the different categories. Next slide, please. So the next steps for this analysis, we published the draft flexible capacity needs assessment paper, as well as this presentation on the website on April 9th, and comments are due on by April 28th. You can submit comments to the below email address, and we will be publishing our final flexible capacity needs assessment for 2021 on May 15th.
Are there any questions for Jessica or Hong or Clyde?
We do not have any questions at this time.
Okay. Then before we wrap up, I just wanted to share with you all that the ISO will be launching a new online stakeholder commenting tool this spring. And through this new tool, the visitors will be able to view all comments in a single location rather than having to open up multiple PDFs like it is today. And the tool will provide the ability to filter the comments by entity or by question. And stakeholders will submit their comments directly in the tool, which will reduce the risk of transferring viruses to the ISO through email attachments. So it's a good effort to increase cybersecurity. There are two exceptions to this. One is if a user needs to submit a formula or a diagram with their comments, and then two, we know during the tariff development phase, users typically submit redlined Word documents, so that would be the second exception. One thing to note is that once this tool is launched, the online commenting tool does require a one-time registration, and then after registering, everyone can sign in with their email address and password and then comment on initiatives. So I just wanted to share that that is coming up, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. So I'll open it up just to see if there are any last questions before we conclude. Rita, are there any questions in the queue?
We do not have any questions at this time.
Okay. That concludes today's call. Thank you all very much for joining, and have a great rest of your day.